Conflict arises from differences, different ideas, different ways of doing things, different understandings of what's appropriate, different worldviews. We explored some of those differences in our module on culture. We are anxious and fearful about things that are different because we don't understand them. Education or familiarization can help reduce the fear of the unknown. One doesn't have to agree with something to reduce that fear. This is just about making the differences understandable. Practices that increase familiarization of different ways of doing things and understand different ways of communicating can reduce the conflict that comes from difference. The second part of reducing conflict is learning how to use those differences productively, which we just discussed. Despite our best efforts, there's always going to be complaints of one sort or another. This is inevitable. Addressing and reducing complaints is complex when we're dealing with issues of human nature and behavior. All organizations experience complaints about discrimination or about reverse discrimination, about fairness, about sexual harassment or harassment in general. But how organizations deal with those complaints is a critical issue for managing diversity. An organization first must have a clear, publicized, and non-threatening complaint process. Employees need to know and be confident in that process. The system's worthless if employees don't feel comfortable using it. Complaints must be dealt with in a sympathetic but neutral and professional way, both for the complainant and the person being complained about. Confidentiality, to the extent possible, should be maintained. I recall in the MPA comprehensive exam a few years ago, we had a question of how to deal with a complaint, and I was really disappointed with how many answers students gave that just jumped to draw conclusions. They proposed taking immediate actions. They made assumptions about guilt or innocence. They put both parties on administrative leave. And I want you to know this was all wrong. When there are accusations, you must take them seriously while remaining professional and impartial. You don't know the answers yet. You must have sympathy and understanding for the feelings of all those involved without drawing conclusions. And this kind of thing doesn't come natural to us. We listen to one person and we believe them and want to take action. We want to make decisions. We want to draw conclusions and get things done. That's not critical thinking. You can't make decisions until an investigation happens. Until then, you are going to gather facts and provide impartial sympathy. Managers who must deal with complaints need training about how to do that right. We'll address this again in our week on leadership, but you need to think about this in terms of a diversity management plan. There needs to be an organizational culture that assures employees that complaints are taken seriously and dealt with fairly and equitably. And this process needs to be publicized and repeated on a regular basis to let everyone know that this is the norm, that this is organizational policy. The number of complaints may be reduced when managers are trained to deal with people who are different and with complaints about difference. Being sympathetic and impartial may mean different things to different people, so don't assume this comes naturally. An ongoing training and leadership program will act to reduce and effectively resolve complaints. My fifth point was increasing diversity if necessary. So first of all, the law focused on specific protected classes, and those are the differences we're required to look at. And those are specifically race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, and age over 40. So how do we know if increasing diversity is even necessary? How do we know what specific kind of diversity should be increased? This is what we're going to call a workforce utilization analysis. How well do organizational demographics mirror regional population dynamics? We need to know this before we know whether we need to take any action. A workforce utilization analysis provides those answers. It compares the occupationally qualified members of a group in the general population to the percent of that group in that occupation in the organization. After we know where we need to improve, we can take appropriate action. Affirmative action is understood by many as quotas, but that's not what it's about today. Quota hiring was declared unconstitutional years ago. Affirmative action today is about recruitment and retention of diverse groups. It's about getting people from diverse and underrepresented groups to want to apply for jobs to our organization. It means creative recruitment policies that are not just putting an ad in a paper and listing a job on our website. We need to seek out communication avenues that are seen and heard by different kinds of people. This is not about hiring unqualified people or giving preferences to certain groups, but it is about encouraging members of diverse groups to apply for our jobs. Affirmative action is also about retention, and that means recognizing that people who are outside the majority may need support to be productive. They may need mentors or support groups. Role models are important. And so a diversity retention plan is an important piece of our diversity management plan. I'm not saying, by the way, that anybody shouldn't have mentors. It shouldn't have mentors for all employees, but you should recognize that members of minority groups may face more difficulties than those from the majority.